journey when you feel like you're going through it by yourself. Whether that's not having a wife with you, or not having someone that you could call a business partner working on an idea with you, or not having someone that's going through a certain struggle or challenge that you're having physically or mentally. And that's why it's so important to have these safe spaces like the King's Talk.
It's essential for us kings to speak up because we're all humans at the end of the day and we face the same battles one way or another. Words are powerful as they can empower and enrich the younger generation where they can probably feel they can't ask for help, they need to stay masculine, or they need to understand that the challenges they encounter, they're not going through it alone. And my mission here and what I do is to allow the younger generation to walk into blessings and show that there's light at the end of the struggle.
Is about action. Fatherhood is doing over saying. If you go into the kitchen and there's no food, right, you're going to be forced to go elsewhere. It's just like children. They are needy, they are hungry, and it's our job as fathers to keep them from going elsewhere. We must be the ones who fill them up, who give them food, spiritual, mental, emotional, right? We must affirm them as black fathers, right? We are called to guide our children.
Giving everyone the opportunity to impart wisdom on future generations is incredibly important. I think this can be transformative. I think it can affect change, and it can produce positive outcomes. Giving the younger generation, in particular young males, access to a resource pool full of individuals who have achieved greatness, and both positive and negative life experiences can be absolutely life-changing.
I believe that this year we have seen a sea change, particularly in the space of ethnicity, and never before has there been more opportunities for young black women, men, and people of color to rise up and assume positions of power. This is our time, but we must be engaged. We must show up. We must give our all to ensure that we can stand and be counted.
I think inclusion is a critical factor for success in a diverse environment. When someone feels they have full rights to belong in the space they occupy, they'll really be able to give it their all. And that's how the best ideas come forth, and how you live up to your full potential. That's why I pushed to have the Pan-African flag flown over Churchill College for Black History Month 2020, because I wanted to create a prominent reminder that as a student of African heritage, I belong and have equal rights to the space we call Cambridge.
There's almost nothing like being a father. Being a father is probably one of the most amazing things that I've ever done in my entire life. And I believe that if we as black men continue to support each other and share information that we have, it'll help be able to raise more kings and be able to help raise more future entrepreneurs and leaders and presidents and so on and so forth.
It's important to find places where we can be included to share our fears, our dreams, our failings, and our faults. Why? Because iron truly sharpens iron, and when we can find that community of brotherhood, we can hold each other accountable, just to not only share our journey, but to learn from each other.
The mission and the purpose for us kings of this generation is very, very simple. We have to speak. We have to be heard. We have no choice. It's our responsibility. I'm not just building for myself. I'm building for my children and my children's children. I'm living a life of purpose for my son to witness, for my daughter to witness, for your children to witness.
I think it's important to celebrate us kings because every day we've had to battle this stereotype of just being less. Like, we need more platforms to celebrate our achievements as it inspires each and one of us. But most importantly, it shifts the culture forward for a brighter future for the next generation. If I win, we all win. If you win, we all win. Kings.
I think it's important for us to speak because there's a whole nother generation coming up under us, man. And I feel like they could take our stories as a positive message and kind of implement it in their own lives and maybe talk to kids younger than them and XYZ, you know what I mean?
I think it's very important for kings to speak. Now, I think through speaking, you're able to empower one another. For example, when you hear another brother going through a struggle and you realize, oh, right, like I'm a part of that kind of struggle. I'm facing that kind of similar challenge as well. It doesn't necessarily make the challenge go away, but you are then able to tackle it in a different manner. It's very important during these conversations for us to listen to similar stories, simply because through listening, healing is able to happen.
Yeah, I think platforms like the King's Talk is a very good platform for men to discuss various issues in our lives. I feel it's great because it shows strength to speak about issues rather than keep it bottled up inside and having it all figured out. I think that's what drives men to a dark place and could potentially suffer from mental illness. But I think it's a great platform, and I think we need to normalize this more and make it more part of everyday conversation.
I definitely think platforms like King's Talk are super important, especially for black men in our culture. The way we're raised usually is just like we're taught to put certain issues like that to the side, not to talk on them and quote unquote man up. So this day and age, especially with all the awareness around that going on, platforms like King's Talk are super important. It's important for us to tune in. It's important for us to learn from them. It's important for us to grow for them, and just keep on elevating as men in society, as black men in society.
I think platforms such as King's Talk are an incredible opportunity for us as men to engage with each other on a shared experience. Because whether we acknowledge it or not, which we probably don't do frequently enough, being known, being seen, being understood, there's a lot more for us than we realize.
In this day and age, it's important to have a platform like this because I think it's understated how much men need a place to exchange real, deep, and meaningful conversations that get to the heart of some of the stresses and pressures that we have to deal with in life.
King's Talk is a very important platform. It's a platform that allows men to come together to discuss matters of the mind. Quite rarely do you hear men gather to talk about mental health and things that are plaguing us internally. Quite often you hear statements like boys don't cry and men don't cry, when in essence we are equally as emotional beings as anybody else. So being able to unravel that, to discuss your burdens, and for other men to let you know you're not in this alone, is very important, especially in this age.
I think platforms like King's Talk are really, really important because it gives men the chance to speak. I think growing up, a lot of the time we didn't really speak, and when things would occur, we'd use other measures to communicate how we feel or not communicate at all. So things like King's Talk give us the chance to like speak man to man.
Platforms like King's Talk are very important for men and black men in particular. I think it's important that, you know, our generation in particular, our generation tend to be a generation that when we were younger, it wasn't really encouraged to show emotion or to express feeling or to, you know, to show vulnerability. And I think that that's very dangerous. I think King's Talk allows and empowers and enables us as men to step into our truth, to grow, to develop, and to enhance our prospects and our opportunities.
As men, we tend to keep everything to ourselves. We want to handle it ourselves. We want to try and sort it out ourselves. We don't want to show that we're weak. We haven't got it all together. We want to show that we're strong. And at times that doesn't really help because we're human beings and there are times where we will struggle. There are times where, you know, we will fall short in certain areas. But I guess it's that pride as well. So we don't tend to engage in the conversations. But platforms like King's Talk is crucial because there's not enough platforms like this to facilitate for men who are struggling.
So important to have platforms like King's Talk because growing up for me, I never knew what it was like to have a father figure in my life. I never knew what it was like to go home and be like, hey dad, I'm struggling financially, emotionally, physically. Can you help me out? But platforms like King's Talk almost give you that representation of what it is like to get advice from a father.
I think the King's Talk platform is really needed and it's powerful for a variety of reasons. But one of them which means a lot to me is when I was younger, I really struggled to communicate my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, and for that reason, that left me feeling quite isolated.
King's Talk is a great platform for people to come together and learn from one another, whether it's learning from someone who's in a position that you want to attain, or whether you're in a position where you can share knowledge and impact other people so everyone grows together. So it creates this sense of community for individuals that come to a space where they feel like they could be vulnerable, where they can learn from each and every one, depending on whatever status that you are in society.
I think platforms and communities like King's Talk are super beneficial for men to come together and share those parts of themselves that are really in line with the male experience, whether that be fatherhood or work, but from a male perspective and sharing it to other males to gain their perspective.
Men often don't have an outlet to express themselves. You know, we deal with a lot mentally. Society has kind of placed an expectation on us to be the strong ones, to be the ones to, you know, push things that are bothering us to the back of our mind. So yeah, I think this platform is a great outlet for men to
I
speak their
think it's
mind, to
important
share.
that, you know, our generation.
Our inner conversations are a bit too heavy. I need to be balanced out with some conversations with somebody else, i.e., a brother, a friend, a father, an uncle, or cousin.
Yeah, life can be such a lonely and tiresome journey when you feel like you're going through it by yourself. Whether that's not having a wife with you, or not having someone that you could call a business partner working on an idea with you, or not having someone that's going through a certain struggle or challenge that you're having physically or mentally. And that's why it's so important to have these safe spaces like the King's Talk.
It's essential for us kings to speak up because we're all humans at the end of the day and we face the same battles one way or another. Words are powerful as they can empower and enrich the younger generation where they can probably feel they can't ask for help, they need to stay masculine, or they need to understand that the challenges they encounter, they're not going through it alone. And my mission here and what I do is to allow the younger generation to walk into blessings and show that there's light at the end of the struggle.
Is about action. Fatherhood is doing over saying. If you go into the kitchen and there's no food, right, you're going to be forced to go elsewhere. It's just like children. They are needy, they are hungry, and it's our job as fathers to keep them from going elsewhere. We must be the ones who fill them up, who give them food, spiritual, mental, emotional, right? We must affirm them as black fathers, right? We are called to guide our children.
Giving everyone the opportunity to impart wisdom on future generations is incredibly important. I think this can be transformative. I think it can affect change, and it can produce positive outcomes. Giving the younger generation, in particular young males, access to a resource pool full of individuals who have achieved greatness, um, and both positive and negative life experiences can be absolutely life-changing.
I believe that this year we have seen a sea change, particularly in the space of ethnicity, and never before has there been more opportunities for young black women, men, and people of color to rise up and assume positions of power. This is our time, but we must be engaged. We must show up. We must give our all to ensure that we can stand and be counted.
I think inclusion is a critical factor for success in a diverse environment. When someone feels they have full rights to belong in the space they occupy, they'll really be able to give it their all. And that's how the best ideas come forth, and how you live up to your full potential. That's why I pushed to have the Pan-African flag flown over Churchill College for Black History Month 2020, because I wanted to create a prominent reminder that as a student of African heritage, I belong and have equal rights to the space we call Cambridge.
There's almost nothing like being a father. Being a father is probably one of the most amazing things that I've ever done in my entire life. And I believe that if we
I
as
think
black
it's
men
important
continue to
that,
support each
you
other
know,
and share
our
information that we
generation in
have,
particular, our generation tend to be a generation that when we were younger, it wasn't really encouraged to show emotion or to express feeling or to
to show vulnerability, and I think that that's very dangerous. I think King's Talk allows and empowers and enables us as men to step into our truth, to grow, to develop, and to enhance our prospects and our opportunities.
As men, we tend to keep everything to ourselves. We want to handle it ourselves. We want to try and sort it out ourselves. We don't want to show that we're weak. We haven't got it all together. We want to show that we're strong. And at times, that doesn't really help because we're human beings and there are times where we will struggle. There are times where, we will fall short in certain areas. But I guess it's that pride as well. So we don't tend to engage in the conversations. But platforms like King's Talk is crucial because there's not enough platforms like this to facilitate for men who are struggling.
So important to have platforms like King's Talk because growing up for me, I never knew what it was like to have a father figure in my life. I never knew what it was like to go home and be like, hey dad, I'm struggling financially, emotionally, physically. Can you help me out? But platforms like King's Talk almost give you that representation of what it is like to get advice from a father.
I think the King's Talk platform is really needed and it's powerful for a variety of reasons. But one of them, which means a lot to me, is when I was younger, I really struggled to communicate my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions. And for that reason, that left me feeling quite isolated.
King's Talk is a great platform for people to come together and learn from one another, whether it's learning from someone who's in a position that you want to attain, or whether you're in a position where you can share knowledge and impact other people so everyone grows together. So it creates this sense of community for individuals that come to a space where they feel like they could be vulnerable, where they can learn from each and every one, depending on whatever status that you are in society.
I think platforms and communities like King's Talk are super beneficial for men to come together and share those parts of themselves that are really in line with the male experience, whether that be fatherhood or work, but from a male perspective and sharing it to other males to gain their perspective.
Men often don't have an outlet to express themselves. We deal with a lot mentally. Society has kind of placed an expectation on us to be the strong ones, to be the ones to, you know, push things that are bothering us to the back of our mind. So yeah, I think this platform is a great outlet for men to speak their mind, to share their views, and to be heard.
When men fail to talk, men penalize men. Well, we're seeing big amounts of men committing suicide. Maybe our inner conversations are a bit too heavy. I need to be balanced out with some conversations with somebody else, i.e., a brother, a friend, a father, an uncle, or cousin.
Life can be such a lonely and tiresome journey when you feel like you're going through it by yourself. Whether that's not having a wife with you, or not having someone that you could call a business partner working on an idea with you, or not having someone that's going through a certain struggle or challenge that you're having physically or mentally. And that's why it's so important to have these safe spaces like the King's Talk.
It's essential for us kings to speak up because we're all humans at the end of the day and we face the same battles one way or another. Words are powerful as they can empower and enrich the younger generation where they can probably feel they can't ask for help, they need to stay masculine, or they need to understand that the challenges they encounter, they're not going through it alone. And my mission here and what I do is to allow the younger generation to walk into blessings and show that there's light at the end of the struggle.
Is about action. Fatherhood is doing over saying. If you go into the kitchen and there's no food, right, you're going to be forced to go elsewhere. It's just like children. They are needy, they are hungry, and it's our job as fathers to keep them from going elsewhere. We must be the ones who fill them up, who give them food, spiritual, mental, emotional, right? We must affirm them as black fathers, right? We are called to guide our children.
Giving everyone the opportunity to impart wisdom on future generations is incredibly important. I think this can be transformative. I think it can affect change, and it can produce positive outcomes. Giving the younger generation, in particular young males, access to a resource pool full of individuals who have achieved greatness. And both positive and negative life experiences can be absolutely life changing.
I believe that this year we have seen a sea change, particularly in the space of ethnicity, and never before has there been more opportunities for young black women, men, and people of color to rise up and assume positions of power. This is our time, but we must be engaged. We must show up. We must give our all to ensure that we can stand and be counted.
I think inclusion is a critical factor for success in a diverse environment. When someone feels they have full rights to belong in the space they occupy, they'll really be able to give it their all. And that's how the best ideas come forth, and how you live up to your full potential. That's why I pushed to have the Pan-African flag flown over Churchill College for Black History Month 2020, because I wanted to create a prominent reminder that as a student of African heritage, I belong and have equal rights to the space we call Cambridge.
There's almost nothing like being a father. Being a father is probably one of the most amazing things that I've ever done in my entire life. And I believe that if we as black men continue to support each other and share information that we have, it'll help be able to raise more kings and be able to help raise more future entrepreneurs and leaders and presidents and so on and so forth.
It's important to find places where we can be included to share our fears, our dreams, our failings, and our faults. Why? Because iron truly sharpens iron. And when we can find that community of brotherhood, we can hold each other accountable, just to not only share our journey, but to learn from each other.
You know, the mission and the purpose for us kings of this generation is very, very simple. We have to speak. We have to be heard. We have no choice. It's our responsibility. I'm not just building for myself. I'm building for my children and my children's children. I'm living a life of purpose for my son to witness, for my daughter to witness, for your children to witness.
I think it's important to celebrate us kings because every day we've had to battle this stereotype of just being less. Like, we need more platforms to celebrate our achievements as it inspires each and one of us. But most importantly, it shifts the culture forward for a brighter future for the next generation. If I win, we all win. If you win, we all win. Kings.
I think it's important for us to speak because there's a whole nother generation coming up under us, man. And I feel like they could take our stories as a positive message and kind of implement it in their own lives and maybe talk to kids younger than them and XYZ, you know what I mean?
I think it's very important for kings to speak. Now, I think through speaking, you're able to empower one another. For example, when you hear another brother going through a struggle and you realize, oh, right, like I'm a part of that kind of struggle. I'm facing that kind of similar challenge as well. It doesn't necessarily make the challenge go away, but you are then able to tackle it in a different manner. It's very important during these conversations for us to listen to similar stories, simply because through listening, healing is able to happen.
Yeah, I think platforms like the King's Talk is a very good platform for men to discuss various issues in our lives. I feel it's great because it shows strength to speak about issues rather than keep it bottled up inside and having it all figured out. I think that's what drives men to a dark place and could potentially suffer from mental illness. But I think it's a great platform, and I think we need to normalize this more and make it more part of everyday conversation.
I definitely think platforms like King's Talk are super important, especially for black men in our culture. The way we're raised usually is just like we're taught to put certain issues like that to the side, not to talk on them and quote unquote man up. So this day and age, especially with all the awareness around that going on, platforms like King's Talk are super important. It's important for us to tune in. It's important for us to learn from them. It's important for us to grow for them and just keep on elevating as men in society, as black men in society.
I think platforms such as King's Talk are an incredible opportunity for us as men to engage with each other on a shared experience. Because whether we acknowledge it or not, which we probably don't do frequently enough, being known, being seen, being understood, there's a lot more for us than we realize.
In this day and age, it's important to have a platform like this because I think it's understated how much men need a place to exchange real, deep, and meaningful conversations that get to the heart of some of the stresses and pressures that we have to deal with in life.
King's Talk is a very important platform. It's a platform that allows men to come together to discuss matters of the mind. Quite rarely do you hear men gather to talk about mental health and things that are plaguing us internally. Quite often you hear statements like boys don't cry and men don't cry, when in essence we are equally as emotional beings as anybody else. So being able to unravel that, to discuss your burdens, and for other men to let you know you're not in this alone, is very important, especially in this age.
I think platforms like King's Talk are really, really important because it gives men the chance to speak. I think growing up, a lot of the time we didn't really speak, and when things would occur, we'd use other measures to communicate how we feel or not communicate at all. So things like King's Talk give us the chance to like speak man to man.
Platforms like King's Talk are very important for men and black men in particular. I think it's important that, you know, our generation in particular, our generation tend to be a generation that when we were younger, it wasn't really encouraged to show emotion or to express feeling or to, you know, to show vulnerability. And I think that that's very dangerous. I think King's Talk allows and empowers and enables us as men to step into our truth, to grow, to develop, and to enhance our prospects and our opportunities.
As men, we tend to keep everything to ourselves. We want to handle it ourselves. We want to try and sort it out ourselves. We don't want to show that we're weak. We haven't got it all together. We want to show that we're strong. And at times that doesn't really help because we're human beings and there are times where we will struggle. There are times where, you know, we will fall short in certain areas. But I guess it's that pride as well. So we don't tend to engage in the conversations. But platforms like King's Talk is crucial because there's not enough platforms like this to facilitate for men who are struggling.
So important to have platforms like King's Talk because growing up for me, I never knew what it was like to have a father figure in my life. I never knew what it was like to go home and be like, hey dad, I'm struggling financially, emotionally, physically. Can you help me out? But platforms like King's Talk almost give you that representation of what it is like to get advice from a father.
I think the King's Talk platform is really needed and it's powerful for a variety of reasons. But one of them, which means a lot to me, is when I was younger, I really struggled to communicate my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions. And for that reason, that left me feeling quite isolated.
King's Talk is a great platform for people to come together and learn from one another, whether it's learning from someone who's in a position that you want to attain or whether you're in a position where you can share knowledge and impact other people so everyone grows together. So it creates this sense of community for individuals that come to a space where they feel like they could be vulnerable, where they can learn from each and every one, depending on whatever status that you are in society.
I think platforms and communities like King's Talk are super beneficial for men to come together and share those parts of themselves that are really in line with the male experience, whether that be fatherhood or work, but from a male perspective and sharing it to other males to gain their perspective.
Men often don't have an outlet to express themselves. You know, we deal with a lot mentally. Society has kind of placed an expectation on us to be the strong ones, to be the ones to, you know, push things that are bothering us to the back of our mind. So yeah, I think this platform is a great outlet for men to speak their mind, to share their views, and to be heard.
When men fail to talk, men internalize men. Well, we're seeing big amounts of men committing suicide. You know, maybe our inner conversations are a bit too heavy. I need to be balanced out with some conversations with somebody else, i.e., a brother, a friend, a father, an uncle, or cousin.
Life can be such a lonely and tiresome journey when you feel like you're going through it by yourself. Whether that's not having a wife with you, or not having someone that you could call a business partner working on an idea with you, or not having someone that's going through a certain struggle or challenge that you're having physically or mentally. And that's why it's so important to have these safe spaces like the King's Talk.
It's essential for us kings to speak up because we're all humans at the end of the day and we face the same battles one way or another. Words are powerful as they can empower and enrich the younger generation where they can probably feel they can't ask for help, they need to stay masculine, or they need to understand that the challenges they encounter, they're not going through it alone. And my mission here and what I do is to allow the younger generation to walk into blessings and show that there's light at the end of the struggle.
Is about action. Fatherhood is doing over saying. If you go into the kitchen and there's no food, right, you're going to be forced to go elsewhere. It's just like children. They are needy, they are hungry, and it's our job as fathers to keep them from going elsewhere. We must be the ones who fill them up, who give them food, spiritual, mental, emotional, right? We must affirm them as black fathers, right? We are called to guide our children.
Giving everyone the opportunity to impart wisdom on future generations is incredibly important. I think this can be transformative. I think it can affect change, and it can produce positive outcomes. Giving the younger generation, in particular young males, access to a resource pool full of individuals who have achieved greatness, and both positive and negative life experiences can be absolutely life-changing.
I believe that this year we have seen a sea change, particularly in the space of ethnicity, and never before has there been more opportunities for young black women, men, and people of color to rise up and assume positions of power. This is our time, but we must be engaged. We must show up. We must give our all to ensure that we can stand and be counted.
I think inclusion is a critical factor for success in a diverse environment. When someone feels they have full rights to belong in the space they occupy, they'll really be able to give it their all. And that's how the best ideas come forth, and how you live up to your full potential. That's why I pushed to have the Pan-African flag flown over Churchill College for Black History Month 2020, because I wanted to create a prominent reminder that as a student of African heritage, I belong and have equal rights to this.
Meet Nicholas Dex, a serial entrepreneur who understands the value of living a life of purpose. His infectious energy and desire for excellence have opened many doors for him, including 10 Downing Street. Having broken the mold as an enterprising creative, Dex has marked a new path for rising entrepreneurs through specializing in lifestyle products such as contemporary brand ODF clothing and the Nicholas Kingsley luxury brand for menswear and home fragrances. His success has also included pioneering Rip the Runway UK and co-founding unorthodox events company Lift Mentoring and talent management company RTR Global. Then one day, Dex met Will. William Adosi is a flourishing businessman who ran his first six-figure startup at just the age of 19. His talents span across a range of industries and are enhanced by his genuine entrepreneurial spirit. Will is the owner of Vitae London, a watch brand that supports children in education across sub-Saharan Africa. Through Vitae London, William has been mentored by Richard Branson and has various celebrity endorsements and has distributed over 2,000 items of uniform to children in need. When William and Dex met, it sparked a conversation between them. A conversation about entrepreneurship, fatherhood, and what it means to be a well-rounded man. As they spoke, they realized that the truth they had learned was too good to keep between them and that it needed to be shared with the world. They decided right there that they wanted to inspire people to become kings and queens, to stand boldly in their area of expertise and to share in the journey. This ignited the birth of the podcast, King's Talk. So enjoy, feel inspired, and be empowered.
Hello and welcome to King's Talk Live. My name's David Alorca and I'll kind of be your host today, helping you move between each of the talks we'll be having, but each of the talks themselves will be hosted by our founders themselves, Mr. Will Adewasi and Nicholas Dex Amphel. Listen, we've got some fabulous topics here and some exceptional guests talking on subjects such as marriage, mental health, sickle cell, entrepreneurship, and so much more. I also want to wish every single person here a very, very, very happy Men's Day. Listen, King's Talk is an incredible platform, and I'm just so happy to be a part of it. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring on the founders themselves. Will, Dex, good to have you. Good to have me on. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to ask you guys first. I don't know if you guys are ready for this, but I'm going to ask you guys first anyway. Why King's Talk?
Why not? Why not? It's amazing because we're literally celebrating our first year anniversary. Last year we hosted an amazing debut event live at the Virgin Money Lounge, and it was such a successful event. You know, we were quite amazed with the amount of response that we received, and you know, due to popular demand and the fact that we're in lockdown and you know the pandemic's hit such a high degree, I think it's important that we bring it back, that we speak and we, you know, integrate how important our voices are and that there's so much power in our vulnerability. So myself and Will had a great conversation and it was like, yeah, we need to make this thing happen. We've got the team together and we're excited for, you know, this event. Yeah.
Absolutely, bringing it back. Will, talk to me. Where did this all start and why?
So yeah, King's Talk it was birthed actually at a dinner at my house. So a mutual friend of ours called Marlon was really passionate about myself and Nicholas meeting up. And yeah, we met up and we just spoke. We had a real authentic and honest conversation. And it was crazy because I had in my mind an idea to have a platform and podcast where men could get together and just open up in a way that isn't really mainstream, that isn't seen enough, especially the black man. And the funny thing is that one night with Nicholas, he had the exact same idea. So we decided to collaborate because two heads are better than one. And yeah, months later, we had the first event, which sold out in like under 2 weeks, had amazing feedback. So many people were touched by what was shared. And I think one of the most powerful things as men is when we're going through what we're going through, just to hear someone else say they're going through the exact same thing, it just gives us that peace and rest assurance that we can get through it. So yeah, that's how it was all started.
Absolutely, and I love what you said there because the truth is, I think we as men, we don't talk enough, especially us as black men, we don't talk enough, but we're all going through a similar struggle or a similar experience from that perspective, and even sometimes the older generation that have gone through other things that we're coming towards. It's good to be able to glean experience or a degree of understanding from them and learning from like their mistakes or learning from their experience from what they've done. And so I just want to thank you guys for, you know, building such an incredible platform and for bringing it back this year, especially in the height of a pandemic where we all can't be together the way in which we would be, but getting us all together today on Men's Day to make it happen. So a major shout out to you guys for that.
Thank you. Another thing that we want to include as well is the unique thing about today's event is that it's not just for the men; it's also for, you know, some of the queens as well.
Let them know.
Want to be educated, that want to understand some of the stuff that we go through, and also for other races as well. You know, just to be educated on some of the reality, you know, of things that we go through as black men. So it's very exciting. And with that being said and done as well, we want to flip the script and kind of ask you a few questions.
Oh, okay. All right, hot seat. Okay.
You know what I mean? Flip the script and ask you some questions as well. You know, why do you think it's important, you know, especially in your position? You know, you've worked really, really hard, and thank you to you, man. And we take our hat off to you because, you know, you have played such a significant role within the industry, specifically sports, being a great personality, a host, and just bringing your energy, your energy in front of the world, and really just embracing that authentically. But we come from a day and age where sometimes, as black people, as black men, sometimes when we're laughing and it's quite loud, and when we're playing music it's quite loud, and we've always been told to dim our light down or reduce our voices. You haven't done that. you continue to take it all the way up. Why is it important to be yourself, and why is it also important to speak as men?
Well, there's a very good quote that says something along the lines of, nobody else is you, and that is your superpower. Like, the truth of the matter is, there is only one you in all of history, and all of history of the earth, and all of history that is to come. You are the only sole person that is you. And so you shouldn't dim your light for nobody. I'm a Christian. There's a biblical verse that talks about, like, should you put a lamp underneath and like, should you cover up a lamp? No, you shouldn't. Should you cover up a light? No, why? A light was made to shine. So you have been blessed, or we've all been blessed with our own individual talents, our own vibe, our own character. And the greatest way to affect the lives of others is to bring what you have. We've and a lot of times, maybe the environments that we've been in has caused us to feel like we've got to dampen down our lights. But those are the very environments that we are supposed to shine in. Those are the very environments that we are supposed to show people that there is another way, that there is that the way in which one subculture has done life doesn't mean that is the way in which we should all conform to. And a lot of times, people are energized by that. They take on that exact same energy. Like, oh my goodness, I love the fact that you're out and vibrant. And not everybody's out and vibrant. Some people are a bit more calm and so on and so forth. But be 100% unapologetically yourself. You were blessed with the character in which you possess, and that's one thing that I like to shine out. I always say, for me, I want the world to know I was here, and I live that in any environment. Even if I'm going to Sainsbury's or Tesco or a supermarket and I'm cracking joke or having some banter with the person behind the till, like, I'd want them to, when they see me again, I'm not just another one of the people that's just scanning through what's happening. Wow. So that's part and parcel as to why.
How did you attain that level of mindset? What was it that you went through? What was maybe the turning point in your life that made you say, yeah, I'm going to be unapologetically me?
I think that's what I'm saying. I think it's a mixture of my upbringing and the confidence that my family's had in me, but it's also, like I said, a lot of my basis and my grounding is because I'm a Christian, so to speak. So there's certain things that I've looked at, or certain things that I've read. So be it in the Bible, be it in textbooks, that talk about certain things like, you are the salt of the earth. What does that mean? The salt of the earth. What is salt? Salt is something that brings flavor. Do you see what I'm saying? It adds flavor. Like black people, we're seasoning. We love seasoning anyway. So the truth of the matter is, we are the flavor. That's what we are as a people. And also, salt makes people thirst. Like, it makes people want more of something. And it's like, my understanding of what that is, or my ability to just like glean that and be like, okay, listen, that's actually my purpose. My purpose, value add, or how can I bring, even if it's a smile or a laughter or some sort of joy to my room.
Yeah. And this next question is open. It can go to Will, it can go to you, Dave. Why do you think it's important, especially as us creatives, entrepreneurs? We have our own businesses, we have our own dreams. Why is it important for us to speak, in general, just as men? Yeah.
Well, you want to say
that? I think it's super important because it's always been a taboo. It's always been that one thing we as men don't tend to do. And I think often you can fester and harbor so many emotions that can be weighing you down, that can be slowing you down in your progress, in you becoming the true version of yourself, because you haven't spoken. And I think the minute you speak out, the minute you talk, that burden that you have within you is then shared. And the load is shared, and it all of a sudden feels a little bit lighter. So yeah, that's why I think it's super important to talk. There's so much to learn from one another. There's so much to glean from one another. One thing we always say, Nicholas, is iron sharpens iron. And I think that's so true. Like, if you're around the right company, you're only going to become a better version of yourself. So yeah, that's why I think it's important.
And on that nugget of knowledge of iron sharpening iron, we are going to kickstart this talk with two veterans. That's right. A veteran in business and a veteran in the armed forces. Will, Dex, over to you guys.
Yes. I'm so excited, man. Will, I know you're excited as well. Our next guest is a phenomenal man, true leader, true example. He's won amazing awards, one being the Spirit of Cisco UK Awards. I remember there was a time in GQ magazine as well. He also was, shortlisted as one of the 100 most connected men in Britain. He's won many awards, one even being a Social Enterprise Years as well. And, I'm privileged to be one of the mentees, under his branch. And, a lot of times when we do our interviews, we like to give the carpet to the speakers that are coming online, and we've got an amazing man here. And as a king, which you are in your field, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, a bit about what you do, and just for the listeners and the viewers, just to be engaged, if that's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to just introduce to you this amazing speaker, Tunji.
Great, thanks, Nicholas, and thanks to the team for having me. So where do I start? So as you can probably tell from my name, my heritage is Nigerian. So I was born here in the UK, so I've lived here pretty much most of my life, but got very strong roots back to my hometown and to where I come from in Nigeria. Luckily, when my parents were alive, they were very good in instigating a lot of our culture into me. So although I've grown up in this country, I've got a very strong affinity to Nigeria, especially, and even more so currently with what's going on there. So I've got a lot of family still there as well as here. I guess growing up, I grew up and have always, lived in London for most of my life. I have actually lived in other countries, US. I've lived and worked in Russia, Dubai, Africa, but I've always been a Londoner when I've been in the UK. And I guess life starting out was pretty tough, and we can probably talk about that as we go through. But suffice to say, I went through school, got out of school, went to university and graduated in microelectronics. I'm actually an engineer by trade, so that's what I kind of know in microelectronics. And I was very lucky that I got into that industry and technology right at the beginning of the advent of the PC. So I've had quite a long roller coaster of a ride in technology over the last, I won't age myself, but it's been a good few decades, and I've enjoyed that. I guess in terms of interest, today I work for a very large professional services organization, one of the big four as they're known. And in that role there, I look at our tech-enabled assets and allow us to take those to market, which is pretty exciting. I've worked for many other organizations before. You mentioned one at the beginning there, Nicholas, in Cisco, and spent a number of years there in a lot of different leadership roles, leading and driving teams to success, which has been great. And I enjoyed that. I probably spent nearly 19 years there, actually. But, a very, very good company, and one that I learned a lot from, not just in terms of technology, but also in terms of leadership and leading people, which has been great. And I guess outside of work, my interests are varied. I run a social enterprise, as you mentioned before. I've actually founded two. I've got my own charitable trust, which I spend a lot of my time on these days, which is fantastic, which looks to help those that are less advantaged, and again, do that in lots of different areas. And I guess my passions remain around sport. I was a sports person in my younger years. and I still am quite interested in that today. So I do a lot of work in sport. I sit on the non-exec board at England Athletics, looking at grassroots athletics and giving back to our communities and getting more people into sport, especially into track and field. And I sit on a number of other boards, do a bit of angel investing. So it's quite varied. And that's one of the things I've always done in life, is to ensure that I've never been pigeonholed in one area. I've always diversified my portfolio in terms of thought and also in terms of experiences. So that's probably a short summary.
Yeah, man. You definitely, man. It was amazing. It was, in our eyes, we just want to just celebrate you because you're a veteran, you know, and it's worth celebrating. And we kind of want to get into it, if that's all right. And more or less say, you know, in your journey, what's been one of the most fundamental lessons you've learned, and what would you say to your younger self?
That's a great question. And I think one of the things I've learned along my journey, and I do look at life this way, and I look at it through, I'd say, 3 lenses. I always look at life in terms of experiences, exposure, and education. And I think you need equal measures of all of those, and also know when to dial up one or dial down one or up on another one. And I've always looked at life like that, not just in my career. And if I was looking at my younger self, I would certainly give that advice, is to, you know, ensure that you are educated. And that's not just in the conventional academic way, but it's about life generally and understanding and seeing different things. I think that's really important. I'm a life learner, and I always say to people that you never stop learning. So always ensure that you read, know about your history and culture, but also be very educated in current affairs and how the world itself operates. You know, I think we all know that the world we live in is not necessarily set up for us, and we have to navigate that. So educating yourself in how to navigate that to ensure that you're successful is important. Experience is really important. So that experience will take you to do different things, whether that's in the workplace, whether it's volunteering, whether it's working in a different country. And I think, again, for me, that's been important. And for my younger self, I'd certainly say, take all the experiences that you can. And if I share one of them with you, when I decided to lead our Russian team, most people here thought I was crazy, you know, thinking, why would you want to go and do that? But you know what? It's probably one of the best experiences I had in terms of understanding a lot more about a country, its culture, and also being able to engage with different people. And I think that's something for me. Those experiences are things that really grow you as a person, and you learn from them, but also develop you as well. And in terms of exposure, I think, again, as a young person, if I was telling myself that, I think it's important to take responsibility for your brand, your purpose, your values, learn those early, and spend the time to discover what those are, because I think those are the things that define you, not just when you're younger, but also when you're older. And if you get that right, your vision right early, then that stays consistent for a number of years and you're not chopping and changing. So I think for me, that's what I would certainly say. The 3 E's is something that has been consistent for a good period of my life.
Amazing.
And I guess following on from that, so being a black man who's operated in high fields amongst big, large conglomerates and organizations, how have you managed to keep your emotions in check in times where you may have been frowned upon or looked down upon purely just because of the color of your skin?
That's a great question, Will, and I think emotions are an interesting topic around. If I think about when I was growing up, I certainly had a pretty tough upbringing. You know, by the time I was 11, I'd lost both my parents. So for me, that whole trauma and all of the challenges I faced were certainly something that, as I got older, I learned to control my emotions. I was very, very good at not showing much emotion. And I pretty much took all of the challenge I had and I probably parked it somewhere at the bottom of my left heel. And it stayed there for many, many years. And I think managing and controlling your emotions is something that you've got to be very careful with, because I think if you manage and control it too much, you suppress it. And if you suppress it, then actually that can cause you lots of issues further down the line. And what I did is I found out in the workplace, especially, that some of that emotion was probably being trapped, and I wasn't really understanding more about myself. And I actually, and I'm quite comfortable to admit it, I actually got some help. I did some self-awareness. I went to the US for a while. I really started to find out who I was as a person. And what's first and foremost is important to be as authentic as you can and not to hide or mask your emotions of who you are as a person. And I think that journey, which was a long one, enabled me to then start to understand who I was as a person. I wasn't then prepared to then have to be something that I wasn't. And I wasn't going to then continue to try and manage or control my emotions. I was going to be speaking from my heart, how I was as a person. Some people will get that and they'll be comfortable with it. Others weren't. And, be okay with that. And what that led to me doing is to then really looking at my own lifestyle. And I live by a very simple way of managing my emotions. But also my life is that I go by a system called the Pavelka system. There's many out there. But there's a very simple mantra around the Pavelka system, which is eat, sweat, think, connect. And those four things is around obviously your well-being from a mental perspective, but also your physical perspective in terms of exercise and diet, but also your mental health, and then also making sure that you're doing things that connect you to people to keep you balanced. And I think that's how I've learned over the years to manage my emotions better, and be able to navigate that in my working life.
I think one thing you touched on there that I'd love to just delve a bit deeper into is where you mentioned within that framework, you mentioned connect. And I would just love to know what kind of disciplines do you have in place to stay connected with others? I don't know, to keep your heart tender in a sense, and ensure that you do keep those emotions in check.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I do, Will, every day. And I do go by those four mantras, but that connect one is a good point. So what I do every day, and, we were just talking now about the fact that, it's been a long day. I've been, on my computer since 8:00 this morning. But one of the things I do as part of my connect thing is that I will reach out to 3 people outside of my work environment during the course of the day. So if I take it today, my younger brother, it was his birthday today, so I reached out and connected there. I spoke to a mentee earlier that's external to the firm, so nothing to do with work. And then often I would either go and do some exercise or do something different. And I think that connect part for me is important to break the cycle of sitting behind your screen all day. And even if I was in the work environment, I've always had a healthy connection with something that's not necessarily work related, that takes my mind off it, but breaks the monotony of the day, but also takes you out of being a bit more healthy and not to keep thinking about something that's work related. So I think that's what I've done, often. And even if it means reaching out to somebody, I've got many mentees, and I'll always at least have one that I'll reach out to every day, even if it's a WhatsApp message. How you doing? What's going on? But it's just that connection with something that's outside of the normal monotony of life that I find is been a really healthy way of keeping my mind focused, but also, as you say, your heart tender. But it's that duty of care to others that I found really, really good.
Amazing. One thing that is really amazing about yourself is, being an amazing husband, father, mentor, sitting on many boards, playing such a significant role within the community. Even recently being one of the ambassadors for BTEC as well, which shows your passion for education. I just wanted to ask, how important is reputation and integrity to you?
That's a great question, actually, Nicholas. So I'm kind of, reputation at the end of the day is something that you have to earn, and it can be taken away very, very, very quickly. And, you can have 15, 20, 25 years of good reputation and do one minor thing or major thing, and then that reputation can be destroyed, and it could take you a lifetime to try and build that up. So I think reputation is important, and I think you've hit the nail on the head in that the integrity part is part of the foundation that supports that. So, for me, I live by a mantra, which is tell people what you're going to do it, and tell them you've done it. I always live by that to ensure that when I've done something, that reputation is continually then built upon, in that the fact is people know that you'll deliver or you're reliable in terms of your word and what you do. And I have to be honest, I do guard my reputation and my brand to some extent quite carefully to ensure that the things that I say I'm doing, I'm actually doing them. And they're not just, almost like the comparison I always used to give is the Hollywood comparison, but it's held up by matchsticks. And then when those matchsticks are gone, it really isn't built on anything that's sustainable. So I've been very specific about the things that I want my reputation to be held against, and I'm comfortable with that. So that goes back to the question about purpose and really discovering what you really want to be known for in life generally. And I think that for me is important to then uphold that.
I think that's so true, because I remember there was a time, I think it was about 3 years ago, 2017, and I was actually at Downing Street, and I spoke to one of the mentees, Joanna, and we just had a rich conversation, and we just spoke, and I literally went up to her and I was just like, sis, I need a mentor. I need a mentor, and I need a mentor that's not just going to help me just in business, but a mentor that's going to help me in life. And she put us in contact, and I kid you not, within like a week or two, we were speaking, we were conversating, we met up, and you followed up on everything you said. And I was at a point in my life, a very low point, that I really needed someone out of my comfort zone to really speak life into me and remind me that it's okay, you're going to get through this. I was just having my little one, and I was just building the businesses, and you really, really did help me. So I can definitely relate to that. Everyone looks at success, but what can we learn from failure?
I'll flip that slightly, Nicholas, around the fact that I never really look at failure as something that is failure. I think that the process of success is that there are learnings from things that you haven't done so well. So for me, I always look at, and I live by a principle. Many years ago, I was lucky enough to go and study in the US, and I studied something called design thinking. And for those of you that may know about design thinking, it goes around the premise that you will try something which you may not necessarily be successful at, but the whole idea is that you then iterate, make some changes, and then you go again. And it may not be perfect the next time round, but then you iterate and you learn each time until you then get it right. And I've always said that, anytime you're not successful in this or a failure, it's never a failure. It's just a process of success. And you learn from that, and then you adjust and iterate, and then you'll be able to go again. When you look at the most of the successful people, the most successful entrepreneurs that you see out there, Nicholas, many of them have not done it on the first attempt. They've often had organizations that they've formed and they've gone bust, and they've had to start again. They've been serial entrepreneurs, and they may not have been successful on their first, second, or third ventures, and then finally they will get it right. But if you ask all of them, they'll all tell you they learned something from that process, and it was just part of the process to being successful. So for me, I've always taken that attitude in that if something doesn't go as I expected it, what do I learn from that? And then ensure that I don't make the same mistakes again. And I always look at that. The more mistakes you make, the more experienced you are, the less likely you are to fail in the future, and the more likely you are to be successful. So it's a necessary process to go through. And if somebody's successful all the time and has never experienced failure, it's much more difficult when they do fail, because they find it harder to cope. So I think for me, I've always seen it as a necessary process to have that.
That's powerful. It's powerful.
And my question following on from that is, obviously being more experienced than us, being a wiser owl, and seeing that all that's happening within the younger Black generation, the Black Lives Matter movement in the West, in the UK and the US, the End SARS movement and protests that are actually going across Africa. What advice would you actually give to the younger generation in our battle for a better future for us? What advice would you give us in order to mobilize and actually best, I guess, use our resources to make a tangible change for the future?
I think one of the things that I think the younger generations are doing, and by the way, I think our younger generation are phenomenal in some of the things they're doing. Even events like what you're doing today is brilliant. I mean, when I was growing up, there weren't platforms like this to be able to share or to be able to learn. And I think that's one of the most important things, Will. It's about learning about the experience that maybe the older people like me, and probably enough of the veteran as well there, Nicholas. I still think I'm quite a young guy, but no, on a serious level, I think for me, I think that there's a lot of learning that's out there that can be used by our younger generations. And then by taking that, it's then for you to be able to succeed much faster and quicker. So, I think that some of the things that young people are doing today are brilliant. But, there's still a very, there's still a very windy road to take, whichever route people are taking. And I think that, it's to support each other more. I see more of that now than I have seen in the past. And I think that all I would say to the younger generations is to work together as a people. We will only be successful if we help each other. And that's, whether someone has a business or whether somebody's in the workplace and they need help. As a leader, I've worked most of my life in the corporate environment. I think it's important that when you have opportunity where you do get to a position of influence or power, that you use that to keep that ladder down to help others, the younger generation, so they can learn quicker and then navigate, some of the challenges that may come later. So I think we have a responsibility to do that. So, very simply, there's three, when you take your road in life, you're going to need probably three, and I'll call them Sherpas because they're people that will help you along the way. The three roles that I always say to young people that are important to seek and to use in the right way are mentors, coaches, and sponsors. Now, the mentors and coaches you'll probably be able to acquire. The sponsors, probably going back to your point earlier, Nicholas, comes from reputation. People will see you. And a very easy way of saying that is I always say to mentees that a mentor will talk with you, a coach will talk to you, and a sponsor will talk about you when you're not in the room. That advocacy part's important. And for the younger generation, seek those people out and then learn with them how to navigate which one you use at the right time. Because sometimes you need a bit of coaching, sometimes you need some mentoring, and hopefully along the way, as you build your reputation, the sponsorship and the advocacy for you when you're not in the room is made to open those doors and opportunities.
Wow. Wow. I'm just learning so much, man, and it's so enlightening and so, powerful in the way you've been able to just explain it to us. My next question I want to ask is, what achievement are you most proud of in your life and career?
Well, I'll be remiss as we're being recorded if I don't say my family first. So, I'm married, as you know, and I think that's certainly being married and having, two wonderful children is certainly something I'm first and foremost most proud of. And then I guess if I look at it on a personal level, there's probably quite a few. Probably hard to pick one. If you ask my daughter, she'll probably say, to your point at the beginning, I think being in GQ magazine was probably her highlight because that's something that she's got bragging rights at the school gate. So that's probably something that she'll probably find, the most proudest thing for her because she thinks her dad's cool. And I have told her it's not because of my sartorial elegance that I was in GQ, that's for sure. But I think probably the things I've been most proud of on a collective basis is the charitable trust. And I think the Elisha Charitable Trust has done some fantastic things over the last few years. When I look at the number of students we've been able to provide bursaries and scholarships to go to university who wouldn't have had that chance, I'm really proud of that. And then seeing them go on to do things well in their communities has been, something I've really been pleased about. And then some of the events we've supported, even I think this month alone, you look at the younger generation, and a lot of my work is around that. The Future Leaders Network conference is going on, which is the future leaders who are mentored by someone on the power list. They have their big G8 forum this month, and I'm proud that our trust is one of the sponsors to help ensure that that event goes ahead. So it's things like that that I'm really proud about in terms of what the trust is doing. And then probably, on a probably more personal level, I think certainly going to Buckingham Palace a few years ago to receive an MBE was probably a surreal moment, but one I was proud of. And I know people have mixed opinions around whether to accept, awards, from Britain in terms of what, an MBE or an OBE or whatever it means in terms of the word empire in it. And I get that and I respect that people had their opinion. But for me, I think it was important to accept it because it was for the work I'd done in helping, young people from ethnic minorities in science and technology, which is something I'm passionate about. And I think for me, it was important that that work, for the trust and for others that had really worked hard with me, that there was, that there was a validation of that. So, I was quite, certainly proud to go there. A different, I think as a family, it's not something you'd get to do every day, but, I certainly, on a personal level, I was quite proud from that.
Wow. I guess following on from that, I would ask, what does legacy mean to you? When it's all said and done, what kind of impact do you want to have left? And what do you want to have been said about you once it's all said and done?
It's a great question, Will, and I'm gonna tell you a small story about legacy. So when I worked at Cisco many years ago, I remember being in the US, and I had a meeting with clients with my boss, who was like the head of Europe, and I was getting ready in the morning for it, and I was quite nervous, to be honest, because it was a big client meeting. It was trying to seal quite a large deal. And we were at our conference in the US, and I got down early. I got myself prepared, and I was waiting for him to come down before the client got there. And he came down the stairs, and I'm like suited and booted because this is an important meeting. And my boss was in like his chinos and a blazer, and he had his carry-on luggage with him. And I kind of looked twice and thought, what are you doing? We've got a meeting. He looked a bit too casual. And he came up to me and said, Tunji, he goes, when you leave this world, and you will leave it, just make sure that you're not remembered because you had a lot of money or you were a VP or a senior VP of any big corporate company. Make sure that you're known for the things that you did positively to impact society and other people. And then he said to me, I'm not attending the meeting. I'm done with the company. I'm retiring. And he kind of then said to me, the keys to the asylum are for you. I'm off. You can handle the meeting. You're more than capable. And he went. I did do the meeting. I got through it, got the deal. And on the plane on the way back from San Francisco back, it really got me thinking about purpose, legacy. What do you want to be known about? Because I think up to that point, as much as I'd been fairly charitable and I'd probably done a lot of mentoring, what I hadn't really thought about is, well, all I ever wanted to do was to get to that next level, get from manager to director, from director to VP. I hadn't really thought about what that legacy looked like. And for the whole 10-hour flight on the way home, it just bothered me to think, well, what does that really mean for me? And that was the start of a journey to then start to think, well, what do you want your legacy to be? Because it's not going to be around the fact of where your roles are or what you've done. And it really was the beginning of me then starting to then look at my trust, look at my social enterprises, where I was going to put my effort. And I started to then really redefine what success for me looked like and what my legacy was. And for me, legacy looks like, as that boss of mine told me, how many people are you going to be able to positively impact, directly or indirectly, during your lifetime? And for me, that's the one area that I've worked on in terms of the mentoring. The trust will probably continue the work long before, long after I've gone. My wife's a trustee. My children, when they reach an age, will become trustees of that. And my hope is that they will continue that work, long after I've gone from here. And we've already had that discussion. My kids are 15 and 13. They know what the trust does. They know the work it's done so far. And for me, hopefully, that legacy will continue in terms of the work we have done is known, and people have benefited from that. And for me, if one person that's been a recipient or a beneficiary from the trust goes on to do great things, then, the work that we set out to do has been done. I know we've done that multiple times already, but, that for me is the legacy that, the trust will be what's left, and hopefully will continue, through my children and through my children's children.
With that also being said and done, I would love for you to share a piece of advice specifically to the younger generation in the fight for equality. There's nothing new under the sun, but we are in a different type of time, shall I say? And I feel like the wise words you've already given us would also be amplified on this specific question. What could we do? How should we go about it? In order for you to really be proud of this generation, it's very important to understand this as well.
Look, Nicholas, I think there's twofold, and I'll probably go back to a point I made at the beginning. I don't think many of the systems in this country, whether they're governmental or whether they're in corporate life, they've not been built around inclusion and equality generally. And I'll give you one small example because it's been going around today. It's something we discussed at work. You probably saw that there was a report that came out from the government, which they released at 1 a.m. this morning, which, was about black people, about racism, etc. Yeah. The interesting thing about that, if you looked at the 12 members of that committee that did that paper, 11 of them were white and one was Asian. So there was no black person actually in the conversation about black people in this country. And the reason for that is that there were 6 members of parliament and 6 House of Lords representatives. Now, whether I may be in a twilight zone, but I'm pretty sure we have black MPs, and I'm pretty sure we've got many lords and baronesses in the House of Lords who could have been representative. And that's my point: is that the structural and systemic processes that this country has in many areas require us to start to dismantle those in a way that means it's fairer. And I think for our younger generation, what you can't do easily is just to say, we're going to take them down. My philosophy and my advice to young people is that the only way that you break a system down is you've got to get into the system in the first place, and then you can rip it out from within. If you're not in the system, then you're always going to be outside, either protesting or throwing stones at the establishment. You have to get in. So for me, I'm always encouraging young people that they need to get into politics. They need to get into corporate organizations. They're going to probably have a longer path to get there, but we need more people to be able to get through. And then when you get to a position of authority or power, then ensure that you keep that ladder down, and then you bring more people in to be able to ensure that it's more equal. On the other side of it, from an entrepreneurial perspective, we need more of our young people to get supported and understand what it means to start a business and then to keep that business sustainable. What are the tools that are needed? Because again, when you look at entrepreneurship, black founders are the least invested in, from the VCs. It's a disgrace, and, at the end of the day, now we're only seeing black, VCs like Impact X and others coming through that can actually give, that investment. We've got to look at the systems and the infrastructure, and then we have to build our own with our young people. But we also need to take down the existing establishment by being part of it, because we can't be outside of the conversation. And the more we push that with our younger generation, using hopefully the advice or the guidance or the support of the elders like myself and others, then that's really what we need to be able to see come through. And I think our young people are doing a fantastic job. I see a lot of the networks, I see that support there in a way that, I would just encourage our young generation to keep doing that. They're much more entrepreneurial, but we want to make sure they succeed faster. And that requires them to understand the apparatus that they need to navigate, and navigate that quicker.
My question, based on all that was just said then, which was really, really fascinating, was in regards to us rising up in establishments that we're often the minority in. I know exactly what you're saying around VC funding. After like years of trying, my company received VC funding last year, so I understand just how difficult it is. But in us trying to rise in white establishments, what advice would you give to people to ensure that they don't lose themselves and that they ensure that they bring in other people? Because often I find that once you do, you've had to compromise so much to get there that you forget the purpose behind it all. So yeah, what advice would you give the young person that's rising up in those spaces to ensure that they stay connected?
Do you know, it's a fascinating point, Will, and I think one of the things that we have to be honest about is that, you know, not all black people in a position of power are going to help other black people to get there or to be able to put the ladder down. Some of it is to the fact that maybe it's been a hard struggle. Others just are not interested. And I think for our younger generation, it's to make sure that they seek out the people that are prepared to help them to do that. And there are many of us out there. So, you know, you're talking about a small minority that won't. Now, within organizations, one of the things I would say today, and the good advice is that one of the only, you know, the real positive things that has come out of this summer and what's happened with Black Lives Matter, it's put the scrutiny on probably every corporate organization globally, let alone in the UK, to start looking not just at what's at the top of their organization and having the token person of color, or saying, yes, we've got, you know, lots of recruitment programs for graduates and we're getting our fair share. It's looking through the middle and the spine of those organizations, because the engine room in those organizations is where the challenge needs to come from. I'm not interested in how many graduates you're taking on. I want to know how many managers, senior managers and directors you have of color at that grade, because if you don't have any there, then actually you're not going to move the needle. And I think that you'll see things such as obviously the race disparity reports coming through. You'll see a lot more information now being shared. We know, you know, you look at the FTSE 100, it's poor. Representation of black people is less than 2%. But then you can look at any other organization. I'm involved in sport. When you look at the national governing bodies for pretty much most of the, the sports bodies out there, less than 2% representation. If you take football alone, and let's keep on football because it's topical. I mean, the comments yesterday by the now outgoing FA chairman is just typical of what the challenge is. And yet there's nobody, on the board there. So it's no surprise that mentality and that language is used in a way. And what was good about yesterday is at least it was seen for what it was, because it couldn't be defended in any way, shape or form. But take that chairman aside, look at the system and look at the structure. And that's why I think, there needs to be more inspection of that. And for young people now, the challenge is there because most organizations are having to do that. So, you'll see things that many firms are doing around how do we improve that? Fair allocation and opportunity to work, understanding those structures. How do people get promoted? Is it just on merit, or are there other things that are in play? Not everybody's going to be wanting to network or to smooth around in the corporate environment in that way. It may be culturally different for them, or they don't feel comfortable with that, but it shouldn't take away their opportunity if they're more than capable. And I think that's where I think for our younger people coming through, that there's going to be, much more scrutiny over organizations and not doing that. And as long as they're delivering, and we do need young people to come into corporate environments because we never change it. Because if everybody goes off and goes to be an entrepreneur and sets their own business up, which is great, then you don't change those big corporations. And we need to do both. So for me, I would say that at the beginning, when you come in, whether you're young as a graduate or even if you're in middle management and you're in your mid to late 20s going into your 30s, now's a good opportunity because many of those organizations are looking, and it's probably an opportunity to put a bit of pressure either on their D&I departments or otherwise, because they're all looking at this as to what they need to do to improve. So it's a good time, but unfortunately that good time has had to come, due to the loss of George Floyd, to get people to wake up and smell the coffee when, we all know that this problem has been there for many, many years, if not decades.
Amazing. And thank you for sharing that. One thing I can definitely learn from you specifically is that you have a heart to give, to invest in people, whether it be your words, your time, and also amplify that. You don't have to wait until you become, this level of success, which you are already in my eyes anyway, and a lot of people's. But it's important to give. Can you explain and can you extend the reason why giving is such a powerful thing? Because this is what myself and Will, we this is where we feel like we just relate so much, that there is so much power in giving, and we leave more room for more things to happen. But could you maybe touch on that before?
Yeah, I can, Nicholas. And look, not everybody wants to give, but I think it depends how you want to live your life and what impact you want to have. And going back to legacy, purpose, again, I was quite lucky enough to get taught in the US by a guy called Professor Adam Grant. He's got a fantastic book called Give and Take, and it's about the whole kind of thing around people that are givers and takers in life and what they give. And the argument is that those people that do give and unconditionally give, will fare better generally in life, because the whole way the world works is that fact is that, if you give, you'll receive that back in abundance. And even, if you're a Christian, in the Bible, it will tell you should give, and, you will receive an abundance. And I do believe actually that you do. So for me, I think that just having a mindset that says, one of the things I can give is my time. I can give advice. I can help sometimes through the trust, but, it's unconditional in that I always believe that that person that will benefit from that will do some good for somebody else in the future. And if I look at my mentors, for instance, or my mentees rather, and I've got many that I have, you've been one of them, Nicholas. I know that those mentees always go on and give more to others, and they are doing more. And that halo effect starts to come in. And that's the only way that we're able to touch our community. And I think that's really important. So, this anyway, Nicholas, but the only thing I ever ask of any of my mentees is very simple. You can have all the time you need of me when you need it, but all I ask in return is that you give that time to somebody else, so that you're then giving your time to mentor somebody else. And I think that what I've shown over the years is that because I've given that consistent duty of care, then those people then will do that, and they'll think, no, I received that. And I'm no different. I was lucky. I had a mentor who saw something in me, who then took me under his wing to be able to give me that opportunity. He saw something in me that many didn't, and said, look, you just need a little bit of mentoring to get you on the right track. And I never forgot that. And that man to this day probably doesn't realize the impact he had from doing that. I'm not even sure if he's still alive. But the fact of the matter is that he essentially said to me that, well, I'm going to give you these tools. You can go out and do what you need to do with it. And I remembered it and thought, well, if I ever get to a position as he was a multimillionaire, this guy. I always said to myself, even if I get halfway where he is, then I'm going to make sure that I'm able to impart whatever knowledge I've got where I'm in a position to do so. I'll do that. And I think that's important. So it's that halo effect. If you think about mentoring circles, how they're built, as just one example, if you ask everybody you mentor, and I probably mentor on any given year anywhere between 25 to 30 people, if each of those then goes off and mentors one person as a reciprocal thing, then suddenly, you're exponentially growing the amount of people that are getting either some wisdom or some support. And I think for me, that's the most important thing.
Thank
you. Amazing. And being the young veteran that you are, what keeps you going? What would you say is what's next from Tunji? What should we expect next?
Oh, thanks, Will. Flattery will get you everywhere. So what's next for me? It's a very good question. I think that probably short term, and when I say short term, probably the next 3 to 5 years, I'll probably continue to do the work with the trust. And I think, we'll continue to, keep supporting students and businesses where we can. I think that's important. And that's part of the legacy, but also something that I'm passionate about. And it covers lots of different things. It covers sport, it covers art, it covers science and technology, it covers inclusion. So there's lots of different aspects to that where I'll certainly spend more time. And even during this pandemic, it's been tougher. We've still supported many people. The other side of it is that I support a number of charities, which I'll continue to do. So everything from the Sickle Cell Society. My father died from sickle cell. So for me, it's something close to my heart. Again, when we talk about inequality, this is a disease and a disorder that should have been cured by now. And it's taken that long because it's predominantly an Afro-Caribbean disease. It doesn't get the same investment. And yet it's probably not half as hard as some of the other types of diseases out there to cure, but we don't get that. So, I'm passionate about making sure that, we keep that work up to support those organizations to fulfill their potential. Probably the rest of the time will be spent, going back to what you said at the beginning, actually, Nicholas, about reputation and where you put your time. I made a conscious decision many years ago, and I don't probably share this a lot, but I do angel invest, and I have done, and every organization I've angel invested in, has always been a black organization, because I believe that if I'm gonna give my money that I've got that I want to invest, I'll try my best to invest that money outside of my pension, which I don't get to say much about, but certainly where I can. Then I want to invest that in different organizations. And again, if I look at the last round of investment we gave, and I'll give one plug today, even though I probably shouldn't, but I will. But Chukwu's Nigerian tapas restaurant is one of our investments. And again, for me, it's great to see Emeka and Ife do a fantastic job there of getting them up and running. And hopefully, when we come out of this pandemic, we'll get a good, clear run to really, fulfill the potential and grow that franchise over time. But that's what I want to be able to do over the next sort of 3 to 5 years, is to continue to invest, provide that advisory to the things I've invested in, and continue to help and support our people.
Amazing. Well, we just want to just say a massive thank you, just for you just being so transparent, and just giving us just a wealth of wisdom, and honestly, God bless you. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Where can some of these, the listeners and the viewers that are tuning in right now, hear more from you, in regards to the social media, some of the things you're working on? Do you mind sharing that, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm on most of the social platforms. So if anyone goes to @Tunji, my first name, _Akintoken, my second name, then you can follow me on Twitter. I'm certainly on Instagram as well. And if you want to follow the trust, it's @Elisha Trust, all one word, which is ILESHA Trust. And if you go there, again, I think we're on all 4 platforms. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Insta, and we're on Twitter. And then again, we share the work that we're doing, supporting students, and really good causes. So yeah, anyone that's interested that can go there. And I think there's a lot of information. And if they want to go and visit the website, that's www.ilesha.com.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. From myself and from Will, we just honestly want to extend so much gratitude to you. And everyone listening can definitely agree with us as well. So yeah, thank you so much again, Tunji.
You're welcome.
You're a veteran in our eyes and veteran in a lot of people's lives as well. So, we definitely want to dedicate this time to you. Yeah?
No, thanks, Nicholas, Will, team. Thank you for having me. And you're absolutely welcome.
So I'm excited for this topic. It's actually a veteran that we're about to introduce, Mr. Vince McBean. We're honored. We're honored to have you join us today in King's Talk. There's a lot of gems that we're going to hear. There's a lot of insight that we're going to be able to get. For those that might not know, Vince McBean joined the army, if I'm correct, in 1971, and he served in Germany, Canada, and Northern Ireland. And, he's actually the chairman of the West Indian Association of Service Personnel. there's so much that this man does. You know, when we talk about, you know, men that have really paved the way, it's endless when it comes to this amazing man, and we are really privileged to have you join us and speak to us. There's a thing that we do, myself and Will, and we actually just ask, you know, our guest speakers to explain to them how they've become a king in their field. So for the listeners and the viewers that you know, want to hear it from the man himself, could you explain to us a bit more about yourself, how things started, and then we can take it from there.
First of all, I'm humbled by your invitation. I think because at the end of the day, we're all here to serve. In terms of myself, I was born in Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica in St. Elizabeth, which is effectively we call it Jamaica the basket. You know, it's the place where all the vegetables, and it's a country place right by the sea. So that's why I like lobster and crab and shrimps, fish, and all the rest of it. I left St. Elizabeth and I went to Kingston. And Kingston Spanish Town. I went to a school called Barrack School, which by its name alone will tell it was an ex-military establishment. It was a notorious school. And it was really strange because at least 40% of the youngsters that came out of there were very good. The World relay team 4x400, a lot of them came from there. Politicians, everybody came from that school. A lot of people, good people came from that school. But also, the other side, we had some of the more notorious people that you may see on the other side of the fence as well. I left Jamaica and I came to England. And after I came to England, I think you'll be aware and accept that the education that we are taught in the Caribbean and usually let's call it ex-colonial places, are quite rigid and strict. And when I came over here, I went from, we used to have first year, second year, third year, and fourth year. I hear now you have year 5 and 9 and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
With me, I haven't got that area yet. But I was asked to move from fourth year to sixth year because I was quite bright, they say. And then after I left school, I wanted to go and work. And being a typical black family, the first thing that came to mind was that I was very good at football. I was doing the 400 meters faster than anybody around in my year. And I played centre half. But I never played with the boys. I played with the men because I'm 6'4", a little bit big. So it was a bit much when you saw a 6'4" tackling another 15, 16-year-old who were like 5 foot whatever. Preston, Blackpool, and a couple of other people came in for me, and they were saying, you know, come and play pro. I took the piece of paper to Mummy and said, Mummy, look. They've asked me to come and play professional football. And as you're aware, when your mother looked like this, she didn't say anything else. She hasn't said anything else. That was the first one. The second one, I said, Mommy, look. So I thought she never liked the team. So I took the second one. And this time she looked me from my foot, my head. She still hasn't said a thing. So I took the third one to her. And she goes, I never tell you. And I said, yes, Mommy, I understand. And that was it. Football out of the window. No football. So then I said, all right, well, I have to do something. So then I saw this army poster to learn trades and so forth. Because I have to admit, I was a little bit of I had a very strong view of things that I wanted to do. And if I have to take a beating for it, I would take a beating from it. I never care. You know, I I wasn't a bad boy. The only thing I did, I stayed at 11 o'clock at night playing football. And half of the time I left my jacket where I put it. That was my only vice as such. And so I joined the army. And when I joined the army, I wanted to go into a rough and tumble group. And a group that, you know, had to say something. So I joined the Green Jackets. And as you're aware, Green Jackets are one more VCs than everybody else. And we were notorious for being good. Not very good when we were at peacetime, though, because we always caused too much trouble. We were quite good at our job. So what transpired after that was that I did my tours. And it's good that, you know, they had the commemoration yesterday for the unknown soldier, because in 74, 75, I was guarding Rudolf Hess, Adolf Hitler, right-hand man, in Berlin, Germany. That's why I was guarding at one stage, because we all had to take it in turns.
Wow.
The British, the French, the Germans, the Americans, sorry. That's how it worked. So I did that for a period of time. Unfortunately, I got injured a few times in some of the things I did. And when finally I was at a particular place in Ireland, I got injured again. And I ended up having been air-vac'd back to England. And I've had 9 operations so far. You wouldn't believe it, but yeah, I've had them. They reconstructed my left leg muscles, pulled in a different direction. I never knew surgeons could do things like what these guys did. And then I had to have ice bath. If you want something to really reach parts that others don't reach, have an ice bath. Trust me.
I'm not ready for that.
You know, the thing is, my God, that was painful. So I had to go through that rehabilitation.
How important is reputation to you as a veteran, as an individual? How important is it?
It's a good question, because reputation don't really mean much to me. It's your integrity. You know, I say that it is. And some people say, oh, but Mr. Vince, you have a load of power. I said, I don't have any.
I think so many of us can obviously relate to elements of what you've been through. You've obviously been through it in a more intense way, in a more intense fashion. And I guess our final question, and I think a lot of, young black men can glean from your wisdom on this. And being a black man in predominantly white spaces, how did you manage that and rise to prominence and become the king you are today?
Fights. That's, you know, because people wanted to do me damage and harm. And I had nothing against them. All because of this 1 millimeter skin I have, you know, but I wasn't going to allow that.
We just want to thank you for your time, for the wisdom, just for the richness in knowledge that you have to share, and just the openness and transparency. So we salute you. We want to give you your flowers, you know, while you're here, or while you're, you know, at the height of your height.
And what a way to kick start the day. Listen, so much insight from these two. And I love the journey that Vince took us on. And just to kind of give you guys a nice little roundup, Tunji highlighted the importance of the power in giving. And broke down the difference between mentors, coaches, and sponsors. You speak to your mentors, coaches speak to you, and your sponsors talk about you. So try to understand the difference between all three of them, and make sure all three of them are important parts of your life and important parts of your journey going forward. Also, you spoke about the importance of giving back to the younger generation, and that's what this is all about. It's good to kickstart with veterans, because we glean a great deal of understanding from what they've gone through. They're ahead of us. But we've also got to remember that we are also ahead of so many others too. And although we do go through some stuff, the younger generation below us are also going through some stuff as well. So it's good to always know that you can always give something. Each one, teach one, you know?
That's right.
Also, touched on legacy being bigger than materialistic things, you know? It's all about legacy. It's all about leaving something behind that is more than just money or more than just garms or more than just personal possessions, but actually putting your investment in the generation that is to come. Vince's journey is, oh my days, absolutely awe-inspiring. He spoke about the importance of leadership, providing homes for young people who had nowhere to stay, and the importance of reputation. You know, the importance of reputation, but the fact that integrity itself is everything. You know, reputation is a good thing. I mean, we all grew up understanding and knowing it's all about your rep, but your integrity is the actual key here. And then the deeper talk for it all also was talking about racism in today's age and the difference between how it was back in the day and where it is right now. And understanding that, I think understanding what that is and where that is allows us to be able to navigate ourselves a lot better in today. So listen, a major shout out to both Tunji and Vince. That was some incredible stuff. Up next, we have two more speakers here with Will and Dex talking to you guys about inclusion. Take it away.
Yes, man. So we're here still, King's Talk, and it's amazing, man. It's amazing. Right now we've got a great speaker, a great, guest, that we are going to be speaking in regards to the topic of inclusion. And yeah, man, we've got a special thing that we say to each speaker that joins us today specifically. And we just want to say, in your field, being a king, could you describe your journey, what it's been like, what you're up to now? Just give the people that are listening an introduction from your perspective. Emmanuel.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Emmanuel. I head up We Are Not the Same UK, which is a organization for sickle cell advocacy and awareness. And that's all about changing the narrative for sickle cell. That's mainly our focus, to be fair. You know, the journey has been very stop-start. It wasn't one that I initially planned to take, to be honest. It was very much something that I fell into because I suffer from sickle cell myself. So for me, it was, something that I kind of, like I say, fell into, and then I've sort of never looked back, really.
Yeah. Growing up, personally, I've known you for quite a long time, and I mentioned this to you, separately. You've always been inspiring. You definitely have this leadership quality about you, and you're. What I love about what you're doing is bringing light, to the awareness behind, sickle cell specifically, and also the voice behind it as well. Just by getting into it, if you don't mind breaking the reality of sickle cell, just for the listeners to be educated and ourselves as well.
Sure. So sickle cell is a hereditary or genetic blood disorder. It's hereditary. So there's a general misconception about, can sickle cell be contracted or whatever. It's a genetic blood disorder, so it can only be passed down from generation to generation. And in order for it to be passed down, both parents have to be carrying the sickle cell gene. So there is the full mutation of sickle cell when both parents carry this gene, or there's the trait. So sickle cell trait is the gene. Once both the parents carry the gene, there's a 1 in 4 chance of the child having full-blown sickle cell. And that's how it came about, or that's how it comes about, rather.
Interesting. Yeah.
I guess following on from that, what kind of education is available for us as a community to read up about the realities of it, and also just to be better at supporting those of us within the community that have to face this day in and day out?
Wow. That's a tough question, because there are organizations out there. However, everything is pretty much grassroots at the moment, in that, to say it bluntly, if for example we're talking about cancer, then we have Cancer Research UK, for example. With something like sickle cell, is quite frankly, because of, I would say personally, predominantly the people that it affects, in that it predominantly affects people from an Afro-Caribbean background, its information is not as readily available. Organizations are not as supported. And so in terms of education being provided, it's very much a case of having to, go out there and seek the information for yourself. In that, just to break down how deep this thing runs, I've literally gone to my workplace and had to draw diagrams of what sickle cell is, to the point where one of my friends has actually got a tattoo of what sickle cell is, so that when she gets asked what is sickle cell, she literally just points to her arm. Sure. That's the diagram, and then the questions come from there. So I mean, the information is there, but it's almost as though it's heavily guarded sort of thing. So you really have to seek it out.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah. So how sickle cell affected you both generally and professionally?
I think it's easiest to start with professionally, because it affects everything. Because you go into an you go into an interview and they ask you things like I'll tell you a funny story. So I remember I went to a job interview and they said, one of the questions on the form was, have you been admitted into hospital in the last 12 months? So if you put yes, then you have to say, the next question is, have you been admitted into hospital more than twice in the last 12 months? For me at the time, it was, think about 15 times within the last 12 months that I've been admitted into hospital. And we're talking about staying in hospital for at least a week. You know what I mean? So it's difficult because sickle cell is internal. There's no outward display to say, oh yeah, that person has sickle cell. And so I have to be able to explain and portray to people, both professionally and personally, that although I may be, in front of you doing a video call, doing an interview, doing normal day-to-day stuff, mostly we operate in pain, having sickle cell, so it's difficult in the aspect of when you're off sick, you will have people in the professional capacity calling you saying, you didn't call in this morning to say that you're not going to be coming in. And the reality of it is, actually, I did call yesterday, and yesterday I made you aware that I'm not going to be able to really check in with you for about at least a week, because when people with sickle cell are admitted into hospital, the go-to painkiller is morphine. And so a lot of people don't even really understand how serious sickle cell is until you start to talk about things like being on morphine for a painkiller. And the intensity of morphine is very high. Most of the painkillers that we're prescribed, we can't drive with them, so under the drug driving law, if we're ill, we can't drive, because, we would be over the limit, or there would be too much of whatever it is in our system. So it definitely hinders opportunity. It definitely hinders progression, and it stunts your ability to kind of flourish, because you wanna just get on. The thing with sickle cell is, although it hinders, you wanna just crack on. You wanna just do whatever it is you got to do, be it personally or professionally. And there's a feeling of wanting to do more and go beyond because of, having sickle cell. But when it stops you, there's no plan, there's no there's no break with sickle cell. So you can just be going around doing what you're doing, trying to achieve that personal goal, that professional goal, and then sickle cell stops you in your tracks. And it's always like a factory reset. So, you know, you have to go back a step to get back to where you were, and then start to pick up again from there.
Wow. I guess one thing you even touched on earlier, which I'd love for you to just delve deeper in, is the fact that obviously sickle cell predominantly affects those of the Afro-Caribbean heritage. And in saying that, do you feel like the wider society hasn't invested as much into the understanding of it, the awareness of it, making a change for it due to the fact that it affects our race and not the others? So yeah, I'd just love for you to delve into that a bit deeper.
Sure. I mean, it's something that I've always felt and something that I've always thought. It's something that I've said professionally as well. You know, I've said to my employers before, if I was calling you with a more popular disorder, then we wouldn't be having the conversations we're having. I'm talking. I've had employers ask to. I've been disciplined for absence, and then I've had employers ask to see my prescriptions. You know, and I showed them my prescription, and I remember I had an incident where my manager said to me, "Why is your medicine in the car?" And I said, if I took my medicine, I wouldn't be at work because I wouldn't be able to function. And there's no way in hell, and I'm yet to be convinced otherwise, if I was dealing with a more popular disease or disorder that affected a predominantly white population, then we wouldn't be having these struggles. We definitely wouldn't, because, you know, this thing, if we're completely honest, it's birthed from, or at least in, Afro-Caribbeans, and that's almost another conversation in terms of, you know, how we are dealt with as a people in the world today. And so to then address something that is affecting these people, it becomes a bigger difficulty and a bigger discussion. And, you know, some of the things that we've long been dealing with, I'm 34 years, for example. One of the things with people who suffer with sickle cell is they have to pay for their prescriptions. Now, so once you finish education, between 18 and the age of pension, you have to pay for your prescriptions. And with sickle cell, we are on medication our entire life. So what you're telling me is that this disorder or disease that I have to pay for my medication for at least 50 years, and there's no help. Like there's no concessions. And the killer is, if I was a drug addict and I went to the NHS and I said, look, I'm trying to come off these drugs, like help me out, then the help is there. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So, and I think that speaks volumes.
To the people that are listening, that are tuning in right now, that are, you know, being educated with the information that you're sharing, I know you said that there's a lot of education that's available, but if you could direct us specifically, you know, to a place or places where we can get more insight in regards to, you know, where could we get that?
So a lot of the people that I work with, so for example, Unsickle My Cells, you have to forgive me, I'm not familiar with websites off the top of my head, but I know Instagram handles, so I'll just give you a ton of Instagram handles if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Unsickle My Cells, Sickle Can, Join Scream, Once UK, obviously, and locally, under a lot of local local boroughs, there are what's called sickle cell and thalassemia centers, and these will inform you of what is going on locally in terms of sickle cell, what is being done on the ground, what is able to affect the community, and what is actually happening to combat sickle cell. St. Thomas and Guy's Hospital is groundbreaking in what they deliver. St. George's Hospital is groundbreaking in what they deliver in terms of treatment. One thing that I feel is necessary to say at this point as well is the lack of black blood donors in the UK at the moment. That is something that is huge. I'll quantify this for you. So a couple of years ago, I went to the one of the central banks where all the blood donations for the day go to. It's in Filton, is up north, and I think on the day 3,200 units of blood were donated, which is amazing, And of those 3,200 units of blood, for somebody like me, only 32 of them were compatible. So you begin to understand the need for a greater conversation in terms of what's happening and in terms of what can be done. And, the harsher reality, which is not often spoke about, is that people die from sickle cell. I unfortunately spoke to my friend yesterday. She lost her friend to sickle cell, and it was the times that we're in have it's weird because the times that we're in have made sickle cell something that is more spoken about. A lot of people have gone into hospital with this COVID thing, talking about, pneumonia-like symptoms, and the suffering that people experience with these pneumonia-like symptoms is common with sickle cell. And in this particular person's situation, she unfortunately wasn't able to get the treatment because the right information wasn't there, because enough blood wasn't there. And as a result of that, she's no longer with us. So yeah, the blood donation thing is massively important.
Wow. And I guess just going on from that, the next question I would then bring is, like, how do you keep the hope? How do you stay trailblazing, building your organization in the midst of these constant cycles of pain? Like, how do you keep the hope, and how do you continually persevere through it all?
It's not about me. That is the truest answer I can give you. If it was down to myself, I would have given up a long time ago. And I got to that point 2 years ago now, I think. Maybe just over 2 years ago, but I got to that point, and I just stopped. I had a lot of personal things going on, and mentally it was tough. It was really, really tough. And I got to that point. I was like, you know what? I can't be bothered with this. It's not. It's bigger than me. But then at the same time, it is bigger than me, and because it's bigger than me, I had to kind of dust myself off, regroup, and just carry on. There are various interviews out there. You can learn from people like the late great Prodigy, people like T-Boz, who talk about the burden of sickle cell, and these are just a couple of people. But living with sickle cell, the physical pain of living with sickle cell is crazy. It's very, very difficult to bear. But the mental challenges that one comes across are bigger than that, in that you ultimately have a disease there that can give you any side effects. I have friends who can't see out of one eye. I have friends who have had hip replacements in their mid-20s, shoulder replacements. I have a friend with a brain aneurysm, and these are all products of sickle cell. So,
Definitely shows how important, awareness needs to be created, and we all collectively need to come together to educate ourselves in this serious matter that's actually happening, because lives are being affected. I also wanted to ask, in the same breath, what measures do you put in place, when finding, a partner? When I say that, I mean it romantically,
Sure. It's the first question. Is it's awkward, but it's got to be done at the end of the day. So, the setup is so you're sitting across the table from this person who potentially you see a future with, and it's like, how do you do this? But ultimately, if you don't do it, then you're just going to find yourself in problems later on. So for me, it's a question straight out the bat, or not even necessarily a question, it's a statement, but it's not something that I hide or, I'm secretive about. And it's a journey to get there, and I want to encourage anybody who's watching this with sickle cell. You go through stages. Like I said, I'm 34 years old, and I've been through stages of denial. I've been through stages of, you know, kind of disregarding how much this affects me and so on and so forth. And I've got to a place now where I've fully embraced this. And so I'm able to meet somebody and be like, yeah, I have sickle cell. What's sickle cell? Well, sickle cell is a genetic disorder that blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden I'm having a whole conversation with somebody about this thing that affects me and how it affects me. But this is the bigger picture. If that person is not interested in what you're saying about sickle cell, then you know what to do. So, it's not necessarily the nicest thing, but it's just going to save you a lot of time, and potentially, it can be damaging if you're not responsible in how you carry yourself, and that's really important.
Yeah. So, what I've also been understanding from the outside looking in, you are working on a few great projects to kind of project your voice out there. One, of course, being, the Once We Are Not the Same organization. But in particular, from my understanding, you're taking another route to maximize how you're going to amplify the message. Could you explain to us and the listeners exactly what that's going to be?
Yeah, sure. So I do music. It's been a passion of mine for a long time. It's been something that I guess I've been ignoring for a long time, and ultimately for me, with music, it makes the world go round, and whatever situation in life you go through, there's a song for it, guarantee it. And I feel like if I can reach the world on a musical level, not specifically about sickle cell, of course they'll hear about my journey with sickle cell through my music, but if I can grab the world's attention just for a second, then I'm going to talk about sickle cell like 100%, so, and every opportunity that I get, that's going to happen.
Powerful.
Incredible. And I guess that leads us on to ask one of the big questions that we like to, I guess, wrap up a lot of our interviews with, and it's what's next? What should we expect next? You touched on the music. What's the vibe with that? Yeah, what should we expect next?
Okay. So, deep end. So I'm working out a few things at the moment in terms of the sound. It's gonna be more than one lane. Music has taken an interesting journey over the last, I'd say, last decade or two, in that I feel like music currently is starting to lose its ability, or it's lost, its ability to make sense. And so you might hear a song that the chorus says, I love you, but the verse says, you're my enemy, I hate you, and I'm running you down, whatever. And then at the end of the verse, you're going on a date. You know what I mean? So for me, I just want to make music that makes sense. And it's going to be a few different sounds. It's not, for people that know me and recognize my face, it's not going to be what you expect from me, 100%. the bigger picture, as I said, I just want to put sickle cell on the map and do what I need to do in terms of changing the narrative. That's very much what this whole thing is for me, just changing the narrative. And so that's why we work with companies like ACLT have been a massive, massive help. Bev and Oren over at ACLT have been a huge help. Working with NHSBT, and the other guys that I mentioned earlier, and of course VPR as well, Vashti over at VPR London, just to change the narrative and really get the message out there. That's what we're working on now, and just giving sickle cell almost a face so that people can identify with what we're talking about and then go out there and make the change.
Amazing. So you've definitely given us a lot of great insight and educated us in many areas. Definitely speaking about, we are not the same, organization, which is Once UK. Is that correct on the social media? We want to give you the opportunity to let the listeners and the viewers know where we can find you and some of the organizations you're working on as well via social media, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. So via on the socials, it's at Once UK. In terms of the finer details, it's something that I'm working on at the moment. With these things, there's red tape. So we're working behind the scenes. As I mentioned, I work very closely with Join Scream and Sickle Myself, Sickle Can, ACLT. These are all registered organizations at the moment. Now, we work together purely because there's strength in numbers, and whatever has been going on before all of us hasn't been working. So what I will, and I say that to say this, there are things out there at the moment that have been out there, but they're not working. So the organizations that I've mentioned is where it's at. And the local organizations, local sickle cell and thalassemia centers are where you can affect change, because whatever has been happening up until now, it's not it.
It's insightful, man. Honestly. Well, from us to you, the listeners will also agree on this. We just want to thank you. Thank you for being transparent. Thank you for allowing your voice to empower other people, and divert your pain to power. And we just want to say we salute you. We're going to support you, and we know that there's more greater things to come, man. So yeah, just thank you, King's Talk, and yeah, man. See you, man.
No doubt, man. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this platform. Appreciate the work that all of you are doing collectively and individually, and it's great to be a part of this and to be heard in this regard. So thank you for having me. Definitely.
No, man.
Bless, man. Bless.
So yeah, just to begin, I just want to say a massive thanks to you, Manny, for being a part of this. Thanks for taking the time out. And to just, no problem, to just dive in for today. I just wanted to ask a super open question. So just tell us a bit more about who you are, and how you rose to be the king you are in your domain.
Oh, that question, yeah. Oh my gosh. But just to make it short and sweet, my name is Manny, also known as the Classic Manny on social media, on the podcast. I've got my own podcast show called The Classic Manny Show, where I talk about all things pop culture, lifestyle, share personal stories. I started my journey about 4 years ago when I obviously started my YouTube channel, and that grew in a good pace, it makes sense, but it went well. And yeah, so that's how it started. And I transitioned to doing podcasting, and I'm just known for just sharing my thoughts, being open and honest everywhere, to social media and on podcasts. But that's a bit about me anyway.
Nice, man. Nice. We've actually listened to the podcast, and there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of energy. So you got to bring that to King's Talk.
Of course. Oh God! If I just break it down in terms of work, thank God I've still got a job. So I started my job around this time last year. So December will be a year. So thank God I'll be able to keep that job. In terms of 1 hour of peace, so I can record in peace. So they're just downstairs quiet. Let's hope they maintain this peace and quiet. So it's just been a challenge, but let's make do of what we have, isn't it? Thank God we've got all the equipment that we need to make our dreams come true. Because it will be hard to not do this for a good couple of months. Like, oh gosh, I love content creating. Is my way of escaping from reality a bit. So I'm glad I'm able to still do that during this pandemic. But I've been okay. Last year prepared me for this year, if that makes sense, because a lot happened last year that I feel like was like my 2020 before 2020 happened.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a challenge, but we rise always. We rise always. As kings, you know, we're all kings here.
That's it, man. You spoke about your description in regards to your bio. You missed out a key point, about you being from Ghana. Is that correct?
Half Ghanaian, half Antiguan, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because Will's stunting with us right now because he's Ghanaian. You know? He's stunting right now. So all right.
Come on.
That's why I'm the only one that's slightly sweating during this call.
No, I see all the content. I'm like, this man is living his best life. But I love to see it. We need that kind of content. Oh, we need that.
No doubt, man. No doubt. All right, let's get into it. Yeah, let's get into it. I just wanna we just want to ask you a few questions. Really just about inclusion, specifically King's Talk, and we appreciate your time, as Will said, and yeah. So we got a question, more or less. Can you more or less tell us why it's important that our communities treat people in general equally?
Yeah. Well, it's a very simple question, but I feel like just because we all deserve that kind of equality, that makes sense. We're all human beings, we deserve human rights, so we see a lot of discussions about, is the LGBTQIA part of the Black Lives Matter movement? Yes, it is. If you're Black and you identify as lesbian, gay, bi, whatever, you're part of it. There's no reason why you should be isolated from that movement, because it's very sad that they make you have to pick. It's like, it's either you're Black or you're thing, but that's not realistic. They're all part of one's identity. And I think it's just so important that we, because we're all struggling. We've all got our own struggles. There's probably Black women, there's Black men, there's Black cis men, there's Black gay men, Black women, Black lesbian women. Like, they've all got their own struggles. So to diminish one just to uplift yours, I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree. Like, it's just, I don't agree with that.
I love what you touched on there, because I think for us as a platform, one of the key things we always want to explore is the intersectionality of the Black man, and actually looking at it holistically. It's so easy to just isolate one element of our narrative and perpetuate that. But we just want to bring a real breadth to that. And I guess it leads to the next question, which would be, what were your experiences growing up in the Black community and embracing your sexuality?
Yeah. So when I saw this question, I had to really think back to the beginning. Not the beginning, the beginning. Like, I had to go to the very beginning of my life, because there's different stages.
Say that for the
in the beginning.
that might not understand.
Obviously, so the viral meme went viral.
But you said it differently. Could you say that again?
Yeah, so there's a viral meme that went around years ago of a president. I can't remember what country. He's going to say beginning, but he said beginning as Beningin. So since then, I've struggled to say that word normally again. Like, it's been a struggle, but beginning from the beginning. So for me, I just feel like, obviously from childhood, obviously, as I said, I'm half Ghanaian. I know more of my Ghanaian side than my Antiguan side. Obviously, the absent father, that's a whole nother topic in itself. But obviously, I grew up on my Ghanaian side. If I say my area had a block of flats in North London, people will be able to guess where that area is, because that's where all the Ghanaians were at. And I think with being Ghanaian, at the same time, there's this culture of people pleasing. Like, I hate that people pleasing lifestyle, but it's like, you have to have your life appear perfect. Even you're going through struggles behind closed doors, you have to appear perfect, or you've got no issues, or whatever issues you have, you're swept under the carpet. So I think that's where it now starts to clash with even my identity as well. Growing up, I was like, okay, now I've got to start hiding it. I've got to start not like talking about it. I've kind of denied it, because what's so crazy is that I was going on Twitter, because obviously a few months ago, people were getting exposed for their old tweets. So I typed in my name with, I said, Black woman or blah, whatever. And thank God there was no bad tweets, but I saw a tweet that said, oh, I'll marry a woman. I said, huh? I said, what did I say?
Whoa.
I said, when did I say that? So even that's why people that get exposed, I give them a little bit of grace, because I didn't remember saying that. Like, I said, what? I've always known from the beginning that was not going to happen. But I think that thing of trying to people please, all that kind of stuff, it definitely got in the way. And I think if I now delve into church as well, because that was a part of my identity as well growing up, oh God. That one, I went to a fully Ghanaian church, and that was a crazy experience. I shared it on my channel, where there's a lot of, again, the favoritism, having to pretend to be who you're not to fit in. And I think I had to leave that to really identify and accept myself. Cause you're kind of put in a place where you have to pick one over the other again. There's a whole thing about you can't be one, you can't be the other. So I just thought, you know what, let me just step out from that. And I'll just, like, since I'm not really been to church, I just use that time to just know myself and get myself for myself. Because obviously there's people and their influences, it can be a negative impact on you. So that's just my experience. I'm trying to keep us YouTube. And I think when I started my channel, I had this goal. That's my motto, which is to do you and be unapologetic, which just meant